It's ESPN.com senior NFL insider Casey Joyner as we get his take on all the action, kind of our around the league NFL rewind, if you will, with Casey Joyner every Monday on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. And we've been kind of hitting on games here and there, Ryan, throughout the day, but this is where you really get the nuts and bolts.
Oh, yeah.
This is really the inside information.
No one better than Casey.
All right, let's bring him in right here on the Boardwalk on the hotline. As we know, week 1 in the NFL almost in the books. We've got a double dip tonight. We'll dive into those games at the end of the conversation, so stick around for that. But first, welcome back, Casey. How are you?
Doing great. That was a fun day yesterday.
It really was. There was some compelling games. We had a tie. We had a heroic effort on a primetime game. We had a lot of close games. We had surprises. We had upsets. I mean, yesterday had a little bit of everything. Of all the games, what surprised you the most?
How bad the Saints defense played. I expected that you're not surprised to see the Buccaneers go vertical. That's what that offense does. They've got vertical receivers, so I'm not surprised to see them do that. But the Saints defense last year had finally found a way to stop vertical passes, and they got some good pass rush. And yesterday they finished next to last in pass pressure rate. They were blitzing all the time, so it wasn't like they were trying. They had the 4th highest blitz rate yesterday, but they weren't able to get after Fitzpatrick, and they allowed a backup quarterback to do that to their defense. That does not bode well for them.
I mean, we know last year in the first 2 weeks of the season they were putrid on defense, and then they turned it around and turned into one of the better defensive teams. So is this just a 1 week where, Jim Schwartz talks about it, how that's just kind of the pace of the game. That's kind of the way it goes. That's the personality of the game. Did the Saints just get into a shootout, or is their defense got some issues?
I think it's a bit of both. I think I don't think they expected, I don't want to say they didn't take it seriously, but I don't think they expected Fitzpatrick to have the kind of game that he had. I think maybe they were figuring that the Bucs wouldn't be as aggressive, but I mean that whole offense, the Buccaneers offense, is built around that. And I think the Saints also want to get in any kind of games like that. They don't want to have Drew Brees get in shootout games anymore. I think they want to become a different style of team. So it may be just that they couldn't dominate the game of the offensive line like they did last year because they didn't have quite the 1-2 combination. And I think, like I said, I think maybe they figured they would get into a different type of game because the Bucs had a backup quarterback and just didn't expect it. So probably 1 week in Lamine.
What you think of Tampa Bay? I mean, what do we take? Philly plays them next. What did you take from them that they can build on, and if you're an Eagles fan, that you would be concerned with? I know we'll go over this matchup a lot deeper on Friday, but just watching them yesterday put up 48, does that change the thought of this game coming up on Sunday?
Curious to see how, over the course of the season, Deshaun Jackson will adjust when Fitzpatrick leaves the lineup and Jameis Winston comes back to the lineup, because Deshaun Jackson had superb stretch vertical and vertical pass numbers over the past couple of seasons. He was one of the best downfield receivers in the league. And then last year, not so much. And Winston likes to throw a lot of vertical passes. In fact, Mike Evans didn't have a great vertical pass set of vertical pass numbers last year either. So I don't know if that was just Winston not playing as well as he could. And I'd be curious to see if the Bucs long term will say if Winston can't hit the vertical passes and Fitzpatrick can, you put Fitzpatrick in the lineup if Winston can't do it. I know Winston's supposed to be your franchise, but if he's not hitting the long passes like he's supposed to, you got to make a change. So if I'm Jameis Winston, I'm a tad bit worried about my job.
All right, let's dive into some of these games with KC looking back at yesterday. Let's start with the Cleveland Browns. A lot of people were looking at them from the Hard Knocks. They're much improved. They got better personnel, but the Steelers are Super Bowl contenders. They have Super Bowl aspirations, but we got to end up with a tie. And that game, realistically, 5 turnovers for Pittsburgh, and it took a couple of those turnovers late in that game to get Cleveland to tie this game up. So what's your takeaway from this one?
Takeaway from this one is it's a typical Mike Tomlin game. This team plays down to the talent level of its opponent. It's one of the reasons why, even though they may have the most talent of any team in the NFL, and James Conner looked fantastic, it's why the Steelers probably aren't going to win the Super Bowl this year, because this is what they're going to do. They're going to overlook teams. Cleveland, they did get lucky. Cleveland allowed, by the way, yesterday, either you could say they allowed or the Steelers gained pass pressure on 52.8% of dropbacks. It was the second highest total in the league for so far through week one. So the Browns don't have any pass blocking to speak of. The run blocking wasn't particularly good. Gordon didn't look that good. And again, if you get a 5-0 turnover edge and the other team is choking on a field goal late in the game and you still can't find a way to win, it doesn't look good for the Brownies.
All right, let's go to Cincinnati beats the Colts 34-23. Luck returns in that game, but I don't know. Give us your breakdown of what you saw from Andrew Luck yesterday.
It's tough. They gave him better pass blocking than I thought. I had their offensive line ranked among the bottom 5 in the league coming into the season, and yesterday they only allowed pass pressure rate in 25% of passes, but they only averaged 5.9 yards per attempt, air yards per attempt. How far the ball traveled downfield on an average basis? That was the 4th lowest total in week one. So it makes me wonder. We had questions in the preseason about whether Luck's arm was going to be back to full strength and whether or not he had he never had a cannon, but whether or not he was going to be able to be the vertical passer that he was in past years. Yesterday, he sure wasn't trying to be that. So if I'm the Colts, I'm wondering if I'm a Colts fan, I'm wondering if that's a longer term issue.
How about the Bengals? 34. They put up 17 in the 4th yesterday. I mean, they get the fumble return for the 83-yard touchdown. What do you think of the Bengals getting that first victory of the year on the road?
On the road, it's a bad defense, but they still had a very good offensive performance. Joe Mixon looks now like he's going to be the bell cow for that offense, which is what they wanted him to be. He had 22 carries. I believe Giovanni Bernard had 3 carries yesterday, so it looks like it's a Joe Mixon offense. AJ Green was what they expected. They didn't get much out of Eifert. They didn't get much out of Ross. So I think those guys are capable of much better. So I think the offense, even though they scored as much as they did, they have a lot of upside. But they only averaged 5.5 air yards per attempt yesterday too, which is the 2nd lowest total in the week. So I think that their offense has more verticality if it wants it.
Let's flip over to the Dolphins. That game took forever. I mean, it was delays, and it didn't get over until about the Sunday night game started last night. It kicked off at 1, but the Dolphins prevailed 27-20. Big loss for the Titans, losing Walker. That was a playoff team. They lose the game on the road. They also had to go to the backup quarterback there as well. So tough start for the Titans. What'd you learn about that game?
Terrible start for the Titans, and Mariota may have the elbow injury. We'll see what happens there. He had to leave the game, like you said. The big issue in that contest I wouldn't worry if I'm the Titans as bad as they played, because they're a run-heavy team, and they did fine in run blocking yesterday. And Derrick Henry, as bad as he looked, fantasy owners are just pulling the hair out about the guy. But he had a 62-yard touchdown run that got called back on a penalty. Their running game will be okay. It's just a matter of if Mariota comes back. The Dolphins, their run blocking, they were graded out as the worst run blocking team in the league last year, arguably, and I had them ranked 32nd coming into the season, but they looked much better yesterday. They had a lot of new faces in their lineup, and it really helped out. Their 44.4% good blocking rate, which is how I measure run blocking effectiveness, that was a higher total than they had in all but 4 games last season. So if they can keep up at that level, the Dolphins are going to have a ground game they didn't have in 2017.
That'll be interesting to see how the Dolphins built from that, because, a lot of people thought they made the playoffs 2 years ago, and they lose Tannehill. They get him back. They win 27-20. Vikings, 24-16. I mean, a lot of people like the 49ers, and a lot of people thought that they would be, one of the surprise teams this year. Everybody thinks the Vikings are a Super Bowl contender. Were you more concerned with the Vikings moving forward after watching them, or were you impressed with the 49ers, the way they hung in there on the road?
I like the way the Vikings defense played. I always thought last year that they were a somewhat overrated unit. If you looked at the metrics, you looked at the deeper metrics, you would find that they didn't perform anywhere near as well as they would look. It was more like they were where they're supposed to be when they were supposed to be than they were actually dominating teams. Yesterday was a somewhat dominating performance. Big concern for the 49ers. They're losing Goodwin like they did. He's their vertical threat. And between Taylor and Pettis and Garcon, and if you look at their target volumes, Kittle leads their team in targets, their tight end, and then they get Taylor and Pettis and Garcon are 6'5" and 6 targets. Those aren't the guys you'll be sending a ton of targets to. Hey, Goodwin's the only great vertical threat, so if he's out or if he's not part of that offense, I think it's a domino effect for that team, so they got to get more verticality.
All right, and then, of course, 49ers lose on the road. I thought for the most part, Garoppolo looked okay. I mean, so many people, he has the pass picked off there. He had a pick 6 that he threw. I thought, Garoppolo just looked okay for his first game yesterday.
Yeah, he did, and it's on the road against the tough Vikings defense. And again, he loses his vertical threat among the receivers. So it says that the 49ers, if everybody's there, they've got the kind of depth, or they've got the type of offense that can really do something well. But now they've lost McKinnon. Morris is still a good running back, but he doesn't. They had expected McKinnon to be the Devontae Freeman of that offense. That was what the role he was going to be. And, of course, Morris can't do that because he's not a pass catcher, and it limits what their offense can do. And if they have McKinnon out and then they lose Goodwin, if you told me coming into week one if they lost both of those guys and their offense is going to have that for the rest of the year, I'd be worried.
All right, Casey Joyner with us here, breaking down all the week one games. And, of course, another interesting one, Patriots, Texans. I guess the story of this one was Deshaun Watson was really not Deshaun Watson that we saw last year.
No, and the big reason was pass pressure rate. The Patriots gained pass pressure rate on Watson on 53.7% of dropbacks. That's the highest pass pressure rate Watson has ever faced. Not only in his pro career, you can go through all of his college career, he never faced pass pressure rate that high. So when you get that much pass pressure on him, as good of a scrambler as he can be, he's not going to do well. Good news is for him, in the next 2 weeks, he's facing teams in the Giants. And I forget who the other opponent is, but he's got two opponents over the next 2 weeks, the Giants and Tennessee, who rank 20th and 25th in pass pressure rate in week one. So I have a feeling that the pass pressure rates will drop for him and he'll start to do better. But if you keep allowing 53.7% pass pressure rates, he's going to have games like this.
Brady, 3 more touchdowns. I mean, man, if there's one guy fending off Father Time, he's it.
He's a phenom. It's incredible what he can do. That offensive line is they only allowed pass pressure in 22.0% of the time. It was the 7th best number in week one so far. That offensive line is blocking extremely well. They've got a lot of depth at running back. They've got a lot of good receivers. In fact, I think their vertical game is going to be even better because he didn't exactly connect with Hogan, and he's going to be able to do that. So as good as they were yesterday, I think he could be even better.
All right, let's jump to we talked a little bit about the Buccaneers and Saints 48-40 in that one. How about Jacksonville beating the Giants 20-15? I mean, I don't know what to make. I mean, the Giants I thought would be better. They got the weapons. Their weapons were really not on display. 3 and 6. That's what the scoring was for them across the board yesterday. I mean, do you just give credit to the Jacksonville defense, or do the Giants still have problems with that offense, and where do they stem from?
That old saying, defense travels, and yesterday defense did travel. The Giants, that's a tough matchup for them. They needed to be able to run the ball better. Barkley ended up with a good game, but he had the one big run, which is kind of surprising because he didn't have, if you look at his breakaway numbers in college, they weren't that high. So you can't just expect that you're going to get one big run every week. The running game needs to get more consistent. But the Giants' offense, I still think, is somewhat limited. But this is more about the Jaguars' defense and how well it played. And the Jaguars being able to lose Fournette and still have a good running game going. They've got some depth at running back, and they've got a pretty good offensive line. So that's a team that can handle losing running back for a week or two.
Yeah, and I mean, I know Eli wasn't the biggest problem yesterday, but the offensive line didn't protect him. And if they're not going to be able to protect, and he has to move a lot, then he does become a problem.
No, they only allowed pass pressure on 22.9% of plays, so it's not the worst number in week one. So they're capable of. They gave him some good blocking, but they only got 6.7 yards per attempt on an air yard basis. They just weren't throwing the ball downfield, and they've got to be able to go vertical. But it's tough because when you're facing Ramsey and you're facing Bouye and you're facing that defense, you're not going to go vertical. So I have a feeling that we're going to see who the Giants are more when they face a defense that isn't, because that secondary could just shut people down. I don't think that's indicative of what New York's going to be all year.
You look at Jacksonville's offense. I mean, they only scored 20, so do you say, hey, the Giants have improved their defense, or is that just another product? I know Fournette ended up getting hurt, so that's a factor in the game for them. Yeldon played pretty well, but with the Jacksonville, what did you think of the Giant defense holding Jacksonville at 20? Is that Jacksonville's offense still isn't very good, or has the Giants' defense improved?
I expected Jacksonville to do a lot better this year. Bortles had posted pretty good vertical numbers last season, and you looked at their matchups this year, and it looked like they were going to be able to do a lot better, and it looks like they're back to, we don't want Blake Bortles throwing this football any more than he has to. We want him to not go vertical any more than absolutely is necessary. So it makes me concerned for the Jaguars offense because they need a plan B for when the running game and things don't work, and they need to be able to get in the higher scoring games. And they've got a receiving core that can do it. They did lose Lee, but Keelan Cole's a pretty good receiver. Dante Moncrief had some really good vertical numbers last year. They've got the capacity to be a better passing offense, but you could tell by yesterday that that's not what they want to do. So I'm curious to see if that's just a one-game anomaly for the Jaguars, and if they're going to make a change later in the year like they did last year and start to throw vertical more often, or if they're just deciding, hey, we want to get back to the other approach, because if so, they're a one-dimensional team.
Breaking down week 1 of the NFL, Casey Joyner, what happened to Buffalo yesterday? Is this going to be them all year, 47-3 to Baltimore?
You had a formula last year with your quarterback and your run game and your defense. You had a particular formula, and you decided that Tyrod Taylor's not a great quarterback, but how can you go into a game thinking that Nathan Peterman's your guy, and now, okay, Josh Allen's your guy? Josh Allen has a lot of talent, but he is inconsistent as can be, and I look at Buffalo, I don't understand what they're doing, because their offensive line's not good, their defense looked terrible, they got dominated in every way possible, and as bad as their quarterback play is, I put them, when I did my rankings for ESPN's Power Rankings this week, I put them 32nd. It was one of the easiest picks of the week, because they're looking that bad right now.
Ravens 47, is their offense revived here? Is this a Baltimore team that we're going to think offense first?
I don't think we're going to think offense first. I think it's just the way that game went, and Buffalo got shell-shocked, and it was part of what they were. But I do think that Flacco, having the competition from Lamar Jackson, caused him to step his game up. Crabtree's a pretty good receiver. They've got some their offensive line is better than expected. I think their defense is much more. I think it's going to be more dominant this year. They're a lot healthier than this year than they were last year too. So I actually moved them up dramatically in the power rankings. I put them on the borderline of the top 10, because I think this is the team they could win 10 games this year if they stay healthy.
All right, Chiefs and Chargers. I had some people telling me at my fantasy draft, you got to get Patrick Mahomes. Got to get Patrick Mahomes. Guess what? I drafted Patrick Mahomes. Too bad he was on my bench, but he looked pretty darn good. He looked like a difference-making player for that Chiefs team, who was kind of always been stuck as a good but not great team.
Yeah, and the idea that he could still get vertical with Tyreek Hill, that he could hit those big passes, and he could do everything that Smith could do was impressive. I was impressed, though, that the Chiefs' defense, and they didn't have a great game yesterday, but, hey, Ron Parker makes an interception. Ron Parker was cut, and he was, I think it was on Washington, and they cut him. And then, this is a guy who was borderline out of the league, and here he is making a pick. He's a backup free safety. They had a backup strong safety. This is a team that had injuries all across their secondary going up against a strong Chargers offense, and they still found a way to post some pretty good numbers. So it speaks badly for the Chargers, because they should have won that game very handily given the injuries, or at least they should have had a better showing than they did. And the Chiefs offense, and they did that well, and Hunt did not have a particularly good game. They've got even more upside if he gets in his group.
Yeah, and the Chargers are a team that, last year they got off to the 0-4 start. Then they started to play well. They made the Chargers, almost made the playoffs. And then this year, all right, this Charger team, they get the full offseason. We think they're going to, and then, boom, they give us that yesterday.
It's terrible. And they've got a ton of playmakers on defense. I have them rated as the
third-rated pass rushers. Defense.
Yeah, great pass rushers. They added Derwin James to their secondary. They've got a lot of playmakers, and yet it looks like they're stockpiling talent but not building a defense. That they've got a lot of talented guys that can do certain things well, but you're not building a defense, and that's the whole point. You got to be building a defense. So, and that they come out and lay an egg like that is just that was one of the most disappointing performances of Week 1, because they were expecting to take over from what they did last year and just roll into this year, and it didn't happen.
Casey Joyner's with us here, and, of course, we're looking back at Week 1. We'll look at the 2 Monday night games tonight in just a bit. Seahawks go on the road to play Denver. These are 2 teams that I don't know that anybody has the identity of them, but the Broncos get that opening season win. But what you think of Keenum in that game?
Back to his risk-taking ways. Minnesota found a way to get him to reduce his risk-taking, but Keenum's been one of the worst performers in my bad decision rate metric over the years. Takes a lot of chances, but he also hits a lot of big plays, and they've got receivers who, if you've got Sanders and you've got Thomas, you should be trying to hit big plays. So they're not the type of team that's built to win shootout games. Their defense isn't the shutdown defense that it was, but it's got some strengths, and I think they're probably going to be better than people expect. And again, the offense is there, but it's Keenum. Can he continue? If he throws 3 interceptions a game every week, then that's going to be a problem. He's got to drop that number.
And the Seahawks, this is a team that most people thought were on the decline. I guess this game is now. They've been historically not a very good road team, even when they've been very good. They've had their issues on the road. Is this just a case of them losing a road game in a tough place to play, or do you think the Seahawks are legitimately on the way down, like many people think?
I think they're legitimately on the way down. Having said that, their defense got the worst pass pressure rate in the league through Sunday in Week 1. Only 12.5% of the time that they get pressure, so they don't have a pass rush. Their secondary is not quite as good. Their offensive line is still bad. Chris Carson didn't look pretty good. Rashad Penny looked like they're already talking about is this guy a bust? But Russell Wilson he can fix a lot of those issues. So even though they're on the decline, I still think this is a 7-9 team. I don't think they're gonna collapse, but they've got too many weaknesses to be able to be a true contender.
All right, Washington. Peterson has a huge day, and we talked about Peterson a little bit last week. I seem to think he still has a little bit left in the tank here, and I thought you saw it yesterday. Now, is he going to pick his spots with that, or can he be a week-to-week guy the way he played? And if he can, one of the things for me with Washington the last couple of years, injuries have been a problem, but they've had no consistent running game. Can Peterson give them that?
I broke down their running game last night as part of for the ESPN Plus article I wrote about offensive line play and how it impacted fantasy performance, which got posted today on the ESPN fantasy section. And Washington's their run blocking was tremendous.
And that's another thing, Casey. Their offensive line is very good.
Yes, they've got a lot of talent. They're healthy this year, and their good blocking rate was only 43.2%, I believe it was, which is good, but not a great number. But the holes they were creating were just, you could drive trucks through them. They were just dominant. And Chris Thompson, he had 5 carries yesterday, and all 5 carries they had good blocking. He averaged 13 yards per carry on those good blocking carries. They were opening up caverns through this. So I didn't even think they have to bell cow Peterson. I think they can make him a lead back and keep him to 225, maybe 250 at most. But I think I can give him 225 carries, give some to Thompson, give some to P. Ryan, and maybe to Rob Kelly. I think they've got enough backs back there that they don't have to wear him down. And if they keep blocking like that, they'll have a phenomenal running game.
Yeah, I like what Peterson brings to that team. 24-6, they beat the Cardinals. Cowboys really struggle, man. They're limited, man. Weapons on offense. Zeke's going to see a lot of stacked fronts. Dak looked like he's regressing. They got no weapons on that team. And I think, Casey, I know you rank the offensive lines a lot. This line has been declining. It has taken a big step back.
I dropped them down to just at the precipice of the top 10 going into last year. They're just outside of the top 10 this year, going into this year. They lost Frederick. That's a big problem for them. And their receiving core, they've got Hearns and they got Beasley, and Beasley was a good possession receiver, and Hearns is what he is. But their number 3, they thought it was going to be Gallup. He finished 4th in snaps, wide receiver snaps yesterday. They thought it was going to be, Terrence Williams had been their top guy last year. He barely got any snaps. They got Deontay Thompson, who they signed just a couple days ago. He was 3rd among wide receivers in snaps. They're bringing in guys off the street. Their tight end is terrible. Their run blocking is regressed. They're still really good run blocking, but you just can't run the ball very well if you can't pass any better than they did. And they gave up pass pressure rate on 38.5% of the time of snaps yesterday. It's a really bad number. They've got some big problems.
Big problems, but Carolina's limited offensively. So the Cowboys defense played pretty well. So overall, is that a team that looks like they're going to be in for a long year, or is Carolina legitimately a pretty good team?
I think Carolina's a legitimately pretty good team. Their run blocking was much better yesterday. Surprised they didn't give it to McCaffrey near the goal line. They had Cam run the ball, and I would think they'd have him do that, or maybe give it to C.J. Anderson, but only give 10 carries to McCaffrey. But they're still talking about what they can do with him. He looked better when he got good run blocking yesterday too. He didn't do very well in that metric last year, so the run blocking is good. Their pass blocking, I think, can be better. I'm not very sold on the vertical passing game. They need to get something there, but they've got a formula where if they can stay within the formula, it'll do very well for them.
Casey Joyner, Sunday night game. I full-fledged. I wasn't watching from the start. My routine on Sunday nights is I typically, I take the break for the first half of the Sunday game. I go watch like Ballers and Shameless, and then I kind of come back for the second half. I had the sports book, DraftKings Sportsbook app, and I said, man, the Packers, I'm getting plus 450 odds on the Packers to win this game. I'm laying all this money on. Well, I didn't realize Rodgers got hurt. Well, he came back and won me big bucks, but break down that game a little. What did we learn about the Bears and the Packers in that Sunday night, which was a lot of fun last night? Great game.
Early on, Trubisky looked like a really good quarterback. You could see why, this guy, why North Carolina was sold on him, why a lot of teams were sold on him early in the draft. People say, he shouldn't have been where he was, drafted where he was. I still think he should have been the number 1 overall pick in his draft, but he wasn't. But he has that caliber talent, and you could see it at that point. But The Bears ran out of gas for one. They let up on the Packers for two. They should have still won that game if they would have kept after it. That's a game to where once this team matures a bit, they're going to win a game like that down the road. But you got to talk Rodgers and what he did. I mean, it's phenomenal the guy can do that on one foot.
I'd like one day for you and Josh to have a battle on Trubisky. He hates Trubisky.
You look at his numbers, you start looking at what he can do, and look at his.
He's saying, "I don't hate him." I would say that he's lying. He hates Trubisky.
I can. A lot of people do, but I'm telling you, he's got mobility. He's got football smarts. He's got a really good arm, not a great arm. He doesn't have the Josh Allen arm, but I'd take him for all the other talents that he has. And Nagy knows what he wants to do with him. Nagy knows this is the kind of offense I want to have with him, and that's an important thing to say. I know what I want to do with my quarterback and my passing game. I know exactly how I want this thing to look. A lot of teams look at Buffalo. Buffalo still doesn't figure out what they want to do. A lot of teams can't figure that out. Chicago does, so I think they keep getting better.
I can't remember who it was. I got to remember, but somebody told me they played – Trubisky went to NC State, right?
I believe it was North Carolina.
North Carolina, not NC State. Somebody had played with Trubisky and said that he was the smartest football player that they had ever played with.
There's a number of people who said that. They were talking on the broadcast last night that Nagy, when he met with Trubisky and at the combine, he wasn't too impressed with him. But then when he met with him in person at the facility, with the Chiefs facility, and it said, hey, he was really that smart. And you start looking at the tape for North Carolina and think he only didn't stay there that long. If he'd stayed there for longer, I think he could have won people over.
That's the problem with a lot of these guys.
Yeah.
You
look. He was ready. He was ready to take a step into the pros and get some pro coaching. He's at the point to where he could benefit from pro coach. A lot of quarterbacks, they got to get that next year in college. He was ready.
And he's got a good one with Nagy. I like what I saw from, and Mack, by the way, was dominating. But between Mack and Smith, that defense is going to be monsters in the Midway again here in a year or two.
They are, and the Raiders. I mean, they took a beating on social media, and they should have to give as much. The whole way that situation worked out to not pay him when they could have paid him and things. And Mack is that kind of a dominant player. The thing is that he makes it to where you have to pay attention to him, and you got to put pass. I don't think he's going to have that kind of game every week, but you have to pay that kind of attention to him, and that opens up so many lanes for everybody else.
There was so much to break down from these games, but let's take a look real quick. Casey Joyner's with us here. We got the 2 Monday night games tonight. Darnold makes his debut. Matthew Stafford is kind of like an overlooked star in this league. I see a 7-point line for the Lions here at home. I like the Jets tonight.
The Jets are. I mean, Darnold is. You look at his tape in college too. Look at his tape and his metrics. It stands out exceptionally well. He's a lot of ways like Andrew Luck, not quite at that level, but a lot of ways when you look at him in college, it was, hey, you could tell this guy is going to be one of the next great pro quarterbacks. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him have a really good performance in Week 1, but he doesn't have much talent around him. The receiving core is not that good.
Rams tonight, Raiders. I personally think the Raiders are going to be a dumpster fire. That's just me. And I like the Rams, but the Rams have that small feeling of the Redskins back when they were buying everybody.
I'm curious to see if the Rams, because you've got all this talent, okay, I want to make sure they're not reading the press clip. That's the only thing that worries me about them, because they kind of froze up in the playoffs, and you've got all these talented players coming in there. If they don't read their press clippings, if they just keep trying to play to their talent level, I got a lot of faith in McVay that he'll get them to do that. If they do that, I think they win this game going away tonight. I think they'll blow these guys out.
Woo, baby. All right. There are the 2 games right here on 97.3 ESPN. Real quick, Corey Coleman, Perryman, Kamar Aiken, and Braxton Miller. The Eagles brought them all in. Can any of them play?
Coleman's got the most talent, and I would always take a bet on talent before anything else. So he'd be the guy I would hope would pan out.
All right, those guys are all in for workouts. Braxton Miller's on the practice squad. He was in Philly today. He is Casey Joyner. And by the way, Casey, before we roll, I know I'm just getting to the article here about how blocking issues hampered a couple of guys yesterday. Watson, Henry, a couple of other guys. This is your article up right now at ESPN.com. And give us a little insight on how, man, offensive line play, it's so sometimes just such an overthought. But your article here really shows Jay Ajayi. You wrote about him in this article, about how it could really be the difference maker.
Yeah, the article looks at blocking and how it impacts fantasy performance, and I've been doing this to some extent for a while, but I've been doing this for this article since my second year, and every time I go into this even further, it's clear how much fantasy performance is impacted by blocking, and this article talks about J.J.'s ceiling is even higher than his week one numbers suggest. He can do even better because the blocking could be even better than it was in week one. It wasn't that good. The Eagles blocking wasn't. Deshaun Watson, how he had problems because of the pass blocking we were talking about. It talks about the Dolphins run blocking and how that impacted Kenyon Drake. And it talks about Derrick Henry. It also reviews Tyrod Taylor and Ryan Fitzpatrick and gives fantasy managers a view into the future as to what I think those performances are going to bode well for those teams.
All right, check that out at ESPN.com. Follow Casey Joyner on Twitter at Casey Joyner TFS, the football scientist. He's right here on the Sports Bash every Monday and Friday on 97.3 ESPN. He's back on Friday with a full breakdown of Eagles, Bucks, and week number 2. Take care, pal.
Appreciate it, man.